Good morning, Mesdeline here, and today is another really good card. I'm loving it. Sometimes the titles of the card are not at all what the card ends up being about, at least for me. Release the dark wound, let love live. You can see the bones in the fish and the bones in her hands. That's pretty cool. If we detach something from its source too soon, trying to force it to become what it is not yet ready or willing to become, we can unintentionally sap it of its strength and kill it. There is a dark wound in the consciousness of humanity which demands perfection and denies process. If you are thinking of publishers before you have even written the book, if you are comparing your unfinished song idea to the latest best-selling pop song, if you have decided you're not good enough or worthy enough to succeed before you've given it everything you've got and asked for divine help, then this dark wound has you in its grasp. You have to let go of the death grip of perfectionism and let yourself and your ideas live. Love is abundant, creative, and inspiring. It moves us so much more joyously and creatively than fear. It certainly does. You're being asked to honor the path of your own love. What inspires you? What feels exciting, joyful, and perhaps even rather different? Let that live. Release the dark wounding of false belief. There are countless stories of vastly successful artists who very nearly binned the project that was the making of their career because of the despair fostered by their own dark nature. They doubted, they were uncertain. Was their work any good? Was it useless? They struggled to believe in the right of a work to come to life, whether it was accepted, revered, or rejected by others or not. They nearly lost their work to fear. Undoubtedly, there have been many times when this has actually happened and the work was not saved, not allowed to live. Do not let this happen to you, whether something is meant to be a commercially oriented venture or a more personal creation for your own therapeutic healing. It must be allowed to be, without judgment, without criticism, even without premature evaluation. It must be allowed to be what it is, and only time, love, patience, and attention will reveal it. So again, I'm going to use myself as an example because, my experience is all I have, right? So two things. When my first husband and I were in college, this was back in 72, and he was a potter and he made beautiful pottery. And there was this one pot that he made that it was just, it ripped. He grasped it. I don't know what he did, but anyway, it came off the wheel in his hands, right? And so he thought, well, he said, I'm just going to make this a practice pot. And he plopped it back down and he made something weird out of it, right? And then he said, let's experiment with the glazes, right? And so we did, we did a wax resist thing. I was helping him with it. Hideous thing. Oh my gosh, it was the most hideous thing we had ever seen, right? When it came out of the kiln. Whoa! And so he had it in his hands and he had it over the garbage bin. He was just going to toss it in with the broken shards of pottery. And this woman screams across the room, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm throwing this away. It didn't come out the way I wanted." And she said, "I'll give you $100 for that. It's the most beautiful pot I have ever seen in my life." She walks over and hands him $100. $100 in 1972. Woo, that's like 1,000 now at least, right? Maybe more. Crazy. What a lesson that was for us. It was ugly to us, but to someone else it was very beautiful. And so, we put these expectations on ourselves. We have all this self-doubt, like what we have isn't good enough. And even if we don't like the outcome, that doesn't mean, like these famous artists and stuff, if you talk to them, they always are critical of their own work, right? But they had the courage to put it out there. The songwriters, the people who do these creative, amazing things, they have the courage to put it out there despite their self-doubts. So for me, I want to write this book. Well, there's several books I have, and I'm getting up there in years. Now, why haven't I written the books? It's been all about self-doubt and fear. Not fear that people won't like it, but just fear that I'm not good enough. Self-doubt has been my biggest nemesis, I guess I'd say. And so it's held me back. It's kept me chained down. And so now, I'm in graduate school, and I was reading some, we do a lot of different classes, and in one of them, there was an interview with a writer, and she'd written this book, and it was a pretty bizarre book. I haven't read it yet, but I read bits of it. And it's bizarre, it's out there, it's spiritual, it's mystical, and just very interesting concepts. Not your mainstream book, right? She's a published author. She's made a lot of money on this book, and don't ask me to remember the title of it. I'll have to look it up at some point. But anyway, and they did an interview with her, and she talked about how she got the book, she sent it to an agent or whatever, and then she talked about the process after that. Writing the book was the easy part, she said. Then she had to edit it and revise it, and the editor would tell her, I want you to change this, or I want you to change that. And she'd say, I didn't want to change it. I liked it the way it was, but I do it because I wanted my book published. And she said it always ended up better. And so as she's talking about this process, what the light bulbs that go off in my head are, I've always been a perfectionist. And I thought, I have to have my book perfect before I submit it to an agent. It has to be perfect. And so what I learned is, no, it doesn't have to be perfect. You submit it, and then they help you make it better, right? The powers that be, the editors, the publishers, they help you make it better. You're not in this alone. And I think that, maybe when you're painting a painting, you might be in it alone, but if you're a songwriter, their inspiration comes from somewhere. And until it's actually, until that book is published, until that song is actually, the music is actually published and the song is recorded, you can change it at any time, right? You can tweak it. You can do, what it needs. So this, I think, like this, it talks about this global, or this, what does it say? A dark wound in the consciousness of humanity that demands perfection and denies process. So it is a dark wound of humanity, and, we can't change humanity, but we can change ourselves. We can't. So for me, it's letting go of that self-doubt, and it's just doing it. And my book is 3/4 written. The one, well, I've already written a book, but nobody knows about it. But the one I'm working on now is 3/4 written, and so I'm working on myself to let go of that self-doubt. And one, you can change yourself. You have control over your own life. And I think if one at a time, then overall we'll change that consciousness of humanity. It's critical that, for the Native Americans believe in the seven generations, right? So wouldn't it be wonderful if 7 generations from now that global wound was healed, and that people didn't think that they had to be perfect before they were accepted. And so the other thing I do as a human, a single person, I work on myself, but I also want to help other people see their own beauty, their own divine essence, their own, they don't need to be perfect, right? Because in my eyes, they're perfect just the way they are, right? In that moment, you're as perfect as you can be, right? And so we're always our own worst judge and our own worst critic. And a lot of times those voices in our head that we hear, saying that's not good enough, that's our own voice. That's not somebody else's voice. There is an aspect of that global consciousness, I think, too. But there's that aspect of global consciousness that is all divine love and light. Listen to that voice. You are beautiful. You are divine. You are perfect just the way you are right now in this moment. I know I repeat that, but I really want you to hear that. Namaste. Have a wonderful weekend.